Welcome to week 4 of Prospect Basketball Weekly. I'm joined once again by Coach Camardella. Coach, thanks for joining us.
Nice to be back.
Obviously, after a long winter break, there's a lot of basketball to cover.
Yep.
Obviously, you guys had a big game against Stevenson and the Hardwood Classic. So let's start with that Stevenson game. Absolute thriller.
Yeah.
Let's start at the beginning of the game when you guys came out to a pretty nice start against a highly touted Stevenson team. How important was it to get out to an early lead on the road?
Yeah, we talked about it, and we were coming off, Stevenson had 8 days off going into that game. We had about 18 hours off going into that game. We're coming out of the Rolling Meadows win, which we put a lot of focus into that week. We had a good Stevenson walkthrough and scouted an important little film session after the Meadows JV game Saturday morning. And we came out, we talked very simply about our defensive principles and what we wanted to see early. We were lucky we hit shots early, which put us in good position. We wanted to keep the game close. Stevenson going into that game was averaging 73 a game. And so to have the game in the 40s going into the fourth quarter was really good for us, and it ended up being probably the most exciting ending that I've been a part of here at Prospect.
And speaking of that ending, obviously, Stevenson goes down. They hit a tough shot at the end, 1.2 seconds left. Refs ended up adding a couple tenths of a second. You guys have 2 seconds left.
Yeah.
And then people haven't seen the replay. I hope they go out and find it. Frankie Mack hits that half quarter.
Yeah.
Just what does it mean to a team to have a shot fall like that in such a tightly contested game?
Well, over the years of doing this, we've had other game-winning shots. We've had some in conference. We've had some in tournament play. We had Grant Miller's shot a few years ago that made it on the national TV when he made the three-quarter court one during the Hardwood. But nothing to the level of what we experienced in that game. And what I mean by that is, Stevenson has been downstate 3 times in the last 4 years. They really have run the area for, you could say, the last decade. And so to go into their gym and to have a chance to win and to have a shot like that go down, I think will be a memory our guys will remember for a really long time.
What effect do you think it's had on your guys' season going forward to beat an undefeated team like that?
Yeah, especially on the road. I thought that when that shot went down with 1.2 and then they added a couple tenths of a second, I was looking at him and I told Frankie, if you ask him, all I said was, don't be short. We drew the play up. He knew he was going to catch it. Richie threw a great pass. And I just said, don't be short. Give it a chance to go in. And, from that point, you see that even when I think a lot of guys would lose heart, they'd put their heads down, they would think the game was over. I saw a lot of really strong body language, and, you give yourself a chance to win. And, when people say every second counts, it literally meant it that time.
And then moving on to the Hardwood, let's start it with the tournament winning, starting the tournament, beat Naperville Central 68-40.
Yep.
It was a quick start. You guys had a great halftime lead.
Yeah.
How important was it to get out to a hot start at the Hardwood?
We felt great. We shot the ball. It's the best shooting percentage we've had as a team in years. We shot 71% for the game as a team. Naperville Central showed 5 different defenses. And I thought the way our guys adapted, hit shots, and sort of took what the defense was giving them, it was a great sign. So it was a great way to start. Obviously, we were disappointed. The shooting went away, and we gave up one too many offensive rebounds to Waukegan, in the second round game. But I thought we finished on a really high note, beating Wheeling and then a really good Deerfield team, and felt good about how we ended it.
Yeah, obviously the Waukegan game, you guys had it very close until a run towards the end of the fourth quarter for Waukegan. How important is it you guys to grow in trying to close games out late or keep them close throughout the fourth quarter?
Yeah, well, we've won 7 of 8, and Waukegan being the only one in that. And of that run we've made, we focused this week a lot on how we're boxing out, how we're rotating defensively. A lot of times we've watched on film that sometimes when shots go up, we're just a little bit out of position, and that really cost us the Waukegan year. And so as we continue to move forward with the second half of the season, our guys know to focus on that weak side, focus on the rotation, and make sure they're in the right position to give them a chance to rebound the ball.
And that Wheeling game, the highlight there was Richie, 14 points, 6 rebounds, 2 assists, 2 blocks, just kind of did a little bit of everything.
Yep.
How important is it to have a well-rounded player like Richie in your lineup?
We've had it, and if you look, Michael and other guys at different positions, if you look at the first 4 games of the season, if we went back to Vider, there were games where we had 3 and 4 guys in double digits. And when we're playing at our best, we have 2, 3, 4 guys scoring in double digits. We have high assist numbers. And we have different guys running in and switching defensive assignments. And Michael's been willing to do just about anything when it comes to the defensive end as well as the offensive end. And it's a great sign moving forward, and I think most of our guys know that it could be a different guy on a different night, and that's what makes us pretty successful.
And then second to last game against Deerfield, last game against Deerfield, close 46-43 victory, but you guys struggled from three-point range and from the free throw line.
Yep.
How important is it to know that you guys can rely on defense, mid-range shooting, driving to the basket, and making those baskets to win a basketball game versus relying on easy points at the free throw line and hot shooting behind the arc?
Yeah, I read those numbers to our guys. They were 3 of 16 from three, and they were 10 of 17 from the free throw line, and they'd missed 3 front ends of 1-on-1. And what I reasoned with them, I go, every past year when those numbers happen, we lose games. Those games are lost. It's like teams usually, you can't shoot that from the line or from three and win games. And, I went back and also showed them our last 3 games against Deerfield have been 3-point or one-possession games. So 3 times ago we won by 3. Eric Porter all the way back in 2012 hit a buzzer shot, that cost us the game. Peter Fusilero hits a 3 a couple years ago to help us win by 1. It's just the games with Deerfield are always so close. And it's promising that when it comes down to the defensive end that the guys know they can get those stops. And we've seen it now in a few games, so that it's showing that we could win at any pace.
And then I think one of the highlights from the tournament would be Frankie. Career high 27 against Naperville Central, 25 against Waukegan. His low mark was 14 against Wheeling, which is still a great number. Like you said, a lot of more sharing around that game. Yeah. And then 20 points against Deerfield. Obviously, coming in prospect, we knew Frankie was very talented. Yeah. But do you think he's starting to develop into a true superstar where he could go out and drop, 25, 30 any night and carry you guys to a victory?
Sure. I think the big part is how his teammates are finding him. I think what Frankie has shown over his 3 years on varsity is that he's now very interested in efficiency. It's not just a high volume of shots anymore. For example, that Naperville Central game where he had 27, he shot 70% from the floor. Right? In the next game against Waukegan, he shot almost 60, shot 58% from the floor. I mean, those are high efficient numbers. And so when you're getting those numbers on limited shots, that's when you're starting to take that step. And so with the guards and, the ability for like our big man Zuba to feed him and find him, it's finding people and putting them in position where they're most successful, and Frank did that perfectly in the hardwood.
All right, thank you, Coach.
Yep.
Next up, Jack Ankony will be joined by player guest Grant Zellmer.
Welcome back to Week 4 of Prospect Basketball Weekly. Now we are joined by player Grant Zellmer. Grant, it's good to have you.
Thanks for having me. It's nice to be here.
Yep. All right, so you guys went 3-1 in the Wheeling tournament, the Hardwood Classic. How do you say you guys are feeling coming off those games?
After the tournament, obviously going 3-1 is a good record. While it might not have been the record we wanted to have, I still feel like that tournament was definitely a very good confidence booster for the entire team going forward.
Okay, so I know probably a lot of people have seen it now, but you had a pretty sweet dunk against Naperville Central. So could you kind of just take us through that plays? Maybe did you guys have it drawn up, and then I guess how did it feel after to accomplish something like that?
Yeah, so that was a play we had drawn up the first week of Christmas break. Just having that one off, that was kind of fun to be able to put into our playbook. Obviously, it took a lot of practice and a lot of post-practice, just practices with my buddy Matt Zuba, who threw an excellent pass on the play. And it was just incredible to have all 5 guys run the play and just have it work out.
All right. So what would you say you guys learned most about yourselves from playing in the Hardwood tournament?
In the Hardwood tournament, we faced a ton of teams and a ton of different looks, both offensively and defensively. I really feel like the experience of playing different teams that we may not have played in our normal regular season game really gave us the opportunity to feel together as a group and be able to adjust on the fly. And that really builds a good relationship with the entire team. All
right, so you guys played Wheeling in one of your games in that tournament, and then now you play them again on Friday. So how helpful would you say that was to see them once before playing them in a conference game that maybe is a little bit more meaningful?
The conference game is definitely going to be more meaningful. It was very nice to see them. However, we know that there's going to be a different team in the conference game. Conference games are always closed, and it's just an entire new level of competition out there. So while it was nice to see them, just seeing them this Friday is going to be a different scene.
Okay, so Coach Camardella talked earlier about how there's a pretty big tie up at the top of the MSL East standings. How important would you say it is for you guys to get a win on Friday?
Oh, this game is vital. We're in a position, after losing our first one, we're in a position now to be back on top again, and we can't blow this opportunity.
Okay. So now, kind of looking as the season as a whole, you guys have had to battle through a couple of injuries with Antonio Gardner and Tim Wessenhop, which have kind of resulted. You've been playing a little bit more of a role. You've been starting a little bit more. How do you think the team overall has adjusted to those guys being out for a little bit?
Obviously, injuries are always tough, especially when one of them is your senior captain, Antonio Gardner, and especially Tim Wessenhop, who had been playing really well up until that point. I think with our team, we've just got a next man up mentality, and I think all players 1 through 16 are ready to go when they get their call, when they get their name called, and it's been really nice to be able to get out there and do something for the team.
Okay, thanks, Grant. Good luck on Friday against Wheeling, and now we will be joined with special guest Coach McColaugh. Thanks. Welcome back to Week 4 of Prospect Basketball Weekly. I'm Jack Ankony. I'm joined by freshman coach Mike McColaugh. Coach, it's good to have you.
Thanks for having me.
All right, so you guys were in the Notre Dame tournament over Christmas break. So what positives could you take away from that tournament?
Yeah, there were tons of positives. For the first time in my coaching career, I've made a lot of finals with freshman teams and sophomore teams, but for the first time we were able to bring home a championship plaque. So that was fantastic for the kids were very excited. We got to play 3 teams that we don't normally play, that are not in our conference, kind of in our area, but with Niles West, Notre Dame, and a championship game against Loyola. So it's always fun to play against different styles, and our kids have continued to push forward, and I think we're getting better and better, and that tournament was a fun reward for everybody.
Okay, so now building off that tournament, what would you say some adjustments you guys are going to make, or things you need to work on now entering back into conference play?
When you get back to the MSL East, like Coach Camardella talks about, everybody's kind of familiar with each other's style. So, we're about ready to head through the second round of the East. So, you play teams for a second time. Kids kind of know each other a little bit more. You don't want to take anything for granted. Whatever you did the first time against a team doesn't really have an effect for the second time. So, our thing is to worry about prospect and to continue to improve throughout the year, and see where we can end up at the end of everything.
All right. What kind of valuable experience do you think you gained from playing in that tournament?
We got to see some different styles. The teams in the Mid-Suburban League, we're very familiar with, how everybody plays, but Loyola is a different challenge. They're very deliberate. They spread the floor, and they make you play defense for a long time. So that was an adjustment that we had to make. Niles West was more of an up and down team that kind of, that's kind of how we like to play here at Prospect. So that was pretty similar. In Notre Dame, it's always very physical, and playing them at home where they're very comfortable it's always a challenge, and it's it's a real good accomplishment to be able to beat them on their home floor.
All right. So now looking at the season overall, how do you say you've seen the team progress since your first Thanksgiving tournament to now as you enter 2017?
It's real interesting going even further back from the Thanksgiving tournament all the way back to the summer. These incoming freshmen had a fantastic summer. They won a lot of games, and they showed a lot of potential throughout the summer. So, we knew we had a lot of talent. We knew we were, the expectation was going to be high for success. But we've really made a focus about every day, one day after the other, from every practice to the next. We're trying to improve and get these guys not just ready to win basketball games as freshmen, but to be able to continue to have success at the sophomore varsity level. So, we're just all about improving every single day throughout the year.
Okay, so you kind of just talked about that improvement, but now looking ahead at the rest of the season, what would you say are some of the main things you're trying to accomplish?
I would say consistency. We've played very well at times this year, and other times we've played well enough, and our kids have been skilled enough to win games. What we're trying to do is, take our understanding of the game, the offensive, defensive concepts that we're trying to teach, just to the next level, hold the guys a little bit more accountable, and then also be able to kind of level out our performances, and not as many ups and downs, just to be more consistent throughout.
Okay, thanks, Coach. And now Paul will be back to talk to Coach Camardella to preview Friday's game against Wheeling.
Welcome back to Week 4 Prospect Basketball Weekly, sponsored by Buffalo Wild Wings. I'm once again your host, Paul Evers, joined by Coach Camardella. Thanks for joining us once again, Coach. So, coming up, game against Wheeling, Friday night, coming back into conference play. Coach just had a great game against them in the hardwood. Played very well. How important is it to win this game, getting back into the conference schedule, and how confident are you guys heading into this game?
Yeah, I mean, considering we saw them just a week ago on their court, and it was a little different scenario. You know, we were both coming off 2 straight games, so limited scout, limited turnaround. You know, right now there's a 4-way tie atop the MSL East. You know, Buffalo Grove and Hersey, ourselves and Wheeling, we're all 2-1. So this is the game that really counts. Our guys know that. I'm sure everybody else in the East Division knows that. And so we've been working, you know, since Monday to really focus in and prepare ourselves for this game. I feel like we have a good sense of their defensive system, but they have athletes all over the floor. You know, you look at, you know, TJ Best and Jalen Dennis coming off really solid football seasons. You know, they're 2 of the best athletes in the area, and so we have to be very aware of what they can do on both ends of the floor.
And then, obviously, you kind of referenced this, but what's the difference between playing Wheeling, say, in the Tarwood Classic, a tournament-type setting, versus conference, you know, even when that tournament-type setting was basically a home game for them because it was their hosted tournament?
Yeah, no, I think the energy of tournament games, and I told our guys, you know, we had referenced our 3 for 16 shooting against Deerfield, you know, the offensive rebounding against Waukegan. You know, when you play in a tournament, so much is about adapting on the fly, and it's not where you have a week so you can prepare and scout and practice and prepare yourself for games. So you sort of take things with a grain of salt. You hope things go well in tournament play, but a lot of guys are logging a lot of minutes in a very short amount of time. So when it comes to this, yeah, the stakes are higher. You know, the pressure is more. You only get 10 East games, and so it's a matter of keeping our guys calm and confident, you know, even when the pressure starts to ramp up here in the second half.
And then, obviously, looking past that Wheeling matchup, you guys have a highly hyped-up matchup against Conant for some crossover play. They're recent champions of the Jack Josh tournament at York.
Yeah.
What will it finally take to get over the hump against this team? Obviously, you played them in the Viator tournament to start the year, MSL championship last year. What is it going to take to get a victory next Tuesday?
I mean, we're very familiar with them. We've played them a bunch of times over the last few years. And, you know, without a doubt, they're the reigning champs. And so with them coming in here at a home game, we can't get ahead of ourselves without, you know, with the Wheeling game.
Right.
But, you know, the tournament that Jimmy Soto's just put together, you know, if you look at his numbers, he shot almost 60% for the tournament, averaged almost 20 points a game. You know, and he's really one of the consummate leaders in terms of a guy taking control of his team. But they got a lot of other parts, and it's a matter of our guys recognizing sort of the risk management of the game and how we're going to approach it with defensive switching and offensive prowess. We're going to be looking towards what type of defense they play. Are they going to come out in man? Are they going to play a little bit more zone? So our guys will be ready, but we're pretty familiar with their system.
Yeah, and obviously, tournament MVP Jimmy Sotos, you kind of talked about his stat line, just a little bit more specific. 19.8 points, 57.4 from the field, and 52.2 from behind the arc.
Yeah.
What is it going to take to slow him down?
Well, there's an old Sports Center line that says you don't stop him, you can only hope to contain him.
Right.
You know, he's a high school kid, but I mean, he's one of the most talented ones to come through here in a long time. You know, and it's a matter of trying to limit good looks, trying to limit easy looks, and just anytime you prepare for a player, you know, of his caliber, it's trying to put them in positions where they're not able to go where they want to go. That's why you play the game.
All right, thank you, Coach.
Yep.
Good luck coming up. This has been Week 4 of Prospect Basketball Weekly. I'm your host, Paul Evers, and we will see you next week.